Part 1. The Man Who Planned Murder Years Ahead. Chapter 1. A Name That Meant Nothing. For most of his life, the name Israel Keyes meant absolutely nothing. He wasn't famous. He wasn't suspected. He wasn't hunted. He didn't write letters to the police. He didn't contact the media. He didn't crave attention. And that is exactly what made him dangerous. Israel Keyes was the kind of man people forgot moments after meeting him. Quiet, polite, unremarkable. A construction worker, a boyfriend, a father, a neighbor. No criminal record that screamed monster. No dramatic outbursts. No warning signs that anyone took seriously. And yet, behind that ordinary face lived a man who planned murder the way others planned vacations. Years in advance, across multiple states, with chilling patience. Chapter 2. A Childhood Built on Isolation. Israel Keyes was born on January 7, 1978, in Richmond, Utah, into a deeply religious, extremist Mormon family. His parents believed the outside world was corrupt, sinful, dangerous. They rejected public education, rejected modern society, rejected authority. Israel and his siblings were raised in near total isolation. No television, no normal schooling, no stable friendships, no exposure to society as most children know it. They moved constantly. Utah, Washington, Maine, never staying long enough to form roots. Israel grew up learning one thing very well: how to exist without being seen. He learned how to disappear, how to adapt, how to observe silently. This skill would later become lethal. Chapter 3. The First Dark Thoughts. By his early teens, something inside Israel had already begun to fracture. He later admitted that violent fantasies started young, not fueled by rage, but by curiosity. He wasn't angry. He wasn't abused in the traditional sense. He wasn't lashing out. He was interested in control, interested in fear, interested in what it would feel like to end a life. He told investigators years later, "I didn't feel normal feelings the way other people did." Instead of empathy, there was distance. Instead of connection, there was observation. He began killing animals, not impulsively, deliberately, testing himself, learning what it felt like. Unlike many killers, Israel didn't spiral. He didn't lose control. He refined himself. Chapter 4. Learning to wear a mask. As a young adult, Israel did something crucial. He learned how to blend in. He joined the U.S. Army, served as a combat engineer, learned weapons, explosives, discipline, logistics. More importantly, he learned how systems work, how people follow routines, how security fails, how planning beats impulse. When he left the military, he didn't fall apart. He built a life. He moved to Alaska, started a construction business, had a daughter, paid bills, went to bars, smiled at neighbors. Nobody saw danger. What they couldn't see was what he was doing in secret. Chapter 5. Kill Kits. Israel Keyes did something almost no serial killer before him had done. He prepared. Years in advance, across the country. Whenever he traveled, for work, for vacation, even for fun, he buried containers in remote locations, buckets filled with guns, silencers, rope, zip ties, duct tape, cash, plastic bags. These were his kill kits. He buried them near hiking trails, lakes, cemeteries, rural roads, abandoned buildings. Places where no one would notice digging. Places he could return to years later. He didn't know who his victims would be yet. That came later. First, he built the infrastructure for murder. Chapter 6. A Killer Without a Pattern. What terrified investigators most was this: Israel Keyes did not have a victim type. Men, women, young, old, couples, strangers. He chose victims based on opportunity, isolation, and timing, not obsession. He didn't stalk for weeks. He didn't follow routines. He arrived in a city, retrieved a kill kit, waited, sometimes days, and acted. Then he left. Different state, different method, no connection. To law enforcement, his crimes looked random. To him, they were perfectly planned. Chapter 7. The crimes nobody connected. For years, people vanished across the United States. A hiker here, a couple there, a lone woman on a trail, someone who never came home. Different states, different jurisdictions, different detectives. No pattern, no suspect. Israel Keyes was counting on that. He once said, "If I hadn't gotten sloppy at the end, I don't think I ever would have been caught." And for a long time, he was right. Chapter 8. The beginning of the end. In 2012, something changed. Israel made a mistake, not because he lost control, but because he broke his own rules. He committed a crime too close to home, used a victim's bank card, left a digital trail. For the first time in his life, technology saw him, and once law enforcement started pulling the thread, the picture that emerged was terrifying. Part 2. The Architecture of a Perfect Predator. Chapter 6. A Killer Who Planned Years Ahead. Israel Keyes was not impulsive. He was not reactive. He was not chaotic. He was a planner. While most serial killers hunted within familiar territories, Keyes designed a system that allowed him to kill anywhere, anytime, and without a pattern. He believed patterns were how killers got caught, so he erased them. Years before committing a murder, Keyes traveled across the United States, often flying thousands of miles away from his home in Alaska. He rented cars under his own name, stayed in cheap motels, visited national parks, small towns, isolated forests, and rural areas where people rarely went missing in clusters. And then, he buried something. They were called kill kits. Inside plastic buckets, he packed firearms, ammunition, knives, zip ties, duct tape, rope, gloves, garbage bags, silencers, sometimes chemicals. He buried these kits deep underground, often near trails, rivers, boat launches, cemeteries, or remote roads. Then he left, not for days, for years. Some kill kits were buried as early as 2001. Some were never used. Some may still be buried today. Keyes didn't hunt when the urge struck. He hunted when everything aligned perfectly. He once told investigators, "I didn't want to rush. I wanted to know I could do it whenever I wanted." This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about revenge. This was about control over time itself. Chapter 7. Randomness as a Weapon. Keyes believed randomness was his greatest shield. He never targeted the same victim type, the same age group, the same gender, the same location, the same method. Sometimes his victims were couples, sometimes individuals, sometimes men, sometimes women. Sometimes he broke into homes, sometimes he attacked outdoors, sometimes he used guns, sometimes knives, sometimes strangulation. He avoided prostitutes, drug users, criminals, because those victims were expected to die. He wanted victims whose disappearance would generate confusion, not patterns. He once said, "I didn't want police to connect anything. I wanted every case to look unrelated." And it worked, for years. Chapter 8. The First Confirmed Murders. The first murders definitively linked to Israel Keyes occurred in June 2011 in Vermont. Their names were Bill Currier and Lorraine Currier. They were an ordinary, middle-aged couple living a quiet life in Essex, Vermont. No enemies, no criminal history, no reason to ever be targeted. Keyes had never met them. That was the point. He chose their house randomly while scouting neighborhoods months earlier. He noted the layout, the distance from neighbors, the lack of security cameras, the quietness of the street. On the night of June 8, 2011, Keyes broke into their home. He waited inside. When the Curriers returned, they had no idea someone was already there. Keyes attacked with military efficiency. He restrained them, separated them, interrogated them calmly. He forced them into their own car. Then he drove them to an abandoned farmhouse he had already scouted weeks earlier. There, he murdered them. Later, during interrogation, Keyes spoke about it with disturbing detachment. They were cooperative. That made it easier. He disposed of their bodies separately. Their remains have never been found. For months, the Currier case went cold. No witnesses, no suspects, no motive. Exactly as Keyes intended. Chapter 9. A Double Life Without Cracks. Back in Alaska, Israel Keyes was living a life that looked shockingly normal. He ran a construction business. He paid taxes. He dated women. He raised his daughter. He attended family events. Friends described him as quiet, polite, reserved, reliable. He didn't drink excessively. He didn't brag. He didn't talk about violence. He blended in perfectly. But inside his head, he was constantly calculating locations, travel routes, time windows, victim availability. Keyes said, "I thought about killing all the time, even when I wasn't doing it." This constant internal planning exhausted him. To cope, he drank heavily after murders. He isolated himself. He drove aimlessly at night, but he never stopped planning the next one. Chapter 10. The Abduction That Changed Everything. On February 1, 2012, Israel Keyes made a mistake. Her name was Samantha Koenig. She was 18 years old, working at a small coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. She was cheerful. She was responsible. She was loved. Keyes walked up to the stand just before closing time. He pointed a gun at her. He forced her into his truck. Unlike previous murders, this one happened close to home. That was the first crack in his system. He took Samantha to a shed near his house. He restrained her. He murdered her. Then he did something he had never done before. He demanded ransom. Keyes withdrew money from Samantha's bank card across multiple states, trying to disguise his movements. But technology had changed. ATM cameras caught him. Cell phone data tracked him. Surveillance linked locations. For the first time, randomness failed him. Chapter 11. The Arrest. On March 13, 2012, Texas state troopers stopped Israel Keyes during a routine traffic stop. Inside the vehicle, Samantha Koenig's debit card, her phone, suspicious cash withdrawals. Keyes was calm. He didn't resist. He didn't panic. He simply accepted it. Later, during FBI interviews, agents realized something terrifying. This was not a man who had killed once or twice. This was someone who had prepared to kill dozens, possibly more. Chapter 12. I don't want you to know everything. During interrogation, Keyes was cooperative, but only on his terms. He admitted to multiple murders, but he refused to give details. He said, "I don't want my daughter knowing what I did." He controlled information carefully. He would give partial confessions. He would stop mid-sentence. He would bargain. He admitted he killed at least 11 people. The FBI believes the number is higher, possibly 20 or more. Keyes enjoyed knowing that investigators would never fully understand the scope of his crimes. Control until the end. Chapter 13. the final act of control. On December 2, 2012, Israel Keyes was found dead in his jail cell. He had committed suicide. He left behind a chilling poem written in blood, a final attempt to control the narrative. He died without revealing all his victims, all the kill kit locations, the full extent of his crimes. Even in death, Keyes denied closure. Chapter 14. The Unfinished Horror. To this day, investigators believe several of Keyes' kill kits remain buried. Multiple missing persons cases may be linked to him. Entire murders were never discovered. Israel Keyes wasn't famous like Bundy. He wasn't theatrical like BTK. He wasn't impulsive like others. He was something worse. A system. A method. A man who turned murder into logistics. And the most terrifying truth is this: if he hadn't made a single mistake, he might never have been caught at all. Part 3. Interrogations, Psychology, and the Victims We'll Never Know. Chapter 21. The interrogation begins. The interrogation room in Anchorage was small, cold, and painfully ordinary. Metal table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted high in the corner, fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly pale. Israel Keyes sat calmly, legs crossed, hands folded. No shaking, no visible fear, no urgency. Detectives expected anger, denial, panic, something. Instead, they got control. From the very first moment, Keyes treated the interrogation like a negotiation. He spoke slowly, deliberately, choosing words with care. He made eye contact when he wanted to dominate the conversation and looked away when he wanted distance. He wasn't there to confess. He was there to manage the narrative. "I'll tell you some things," he said quietly, "but only if I want to." This wasn't arrogance, it was calculation. Chapter 22. The Rules of the Game. Keyes laid out conditions early. He would not discuss crimes involving children. He would not name most victims. He would not talk about crimes outside certain areas. He would stop cooperating if detectives pushed too hard. And most importantly, "I won't give you everything. You don't get everything." For investigators, this was infuriating. For profilers, it was revealing. Keyes didn't want fame like BTK. He didn't crave admiration like Bundy. He didn't enjoy shocking people like Dahmer. He wanted control over knowledge. What people knew and didn't know was his final weapon. Chapter 23. The Psychology of Absolute Control. Psychologists who later reviewed the interrogations described Keyes as one of the most controlled serial offenders ever studied. 1. Emotional containment. Keyes showed almost no emotional spikes. He could describe murder with the same tone he used to describe grocery shopping. His voice rarely changed pitch. His breathing stayed steady. This wasn't dissociation. This was discipline. 2. No signature, only method. Unlike most serial killers, Keyes avoided signatures. No calling cards, no patterns, no rituals left behind. Instead, he focused on method: surprise, restraint, transport, execution, disposal. His crimes weren't about expression, they were about efficiency. 3. Compartmentalization at an extreme level. Keyes didn't just separate his killing life from his normal life, he built mental walls between them. In one moment, he could laugh about his daughter. In the next, describe binding a victim. And then switch back. No emotional bleed-through. That ability made him nearly invisible. Chapter 24. The Cash System. One of the most chilling revelations came when Keyes explained his cash system. For years, he buried murder kits across the United States. Guns, ammunition, rope, duct tape, zip ties, silencers, cash. He placed them years in advance, sometimes a decade before he used them. The locations were random: forests, cemeteries, national parks, remote fields. He traveled thousands of miles by plane, rented cars, committed murders, and flew home, leaving almost no forensic trail. He said, "I didn't want patterns. Patterns get you caught." And he was right. Chapter 25. The Victims Without Names. During interrogation, detectives pushed repeatedly for the identities of other victims. Keyes resisted. He admitted openly, "There are others, more than you know." But when asked how many, he refused to answer. Sometimes he smiled faintly, sometimes he shrugged, sometimes he changed the subject entirely. He hinted at murders in Washington, Oregon, California, Utah, New York, Vermont, Texas, Alaska, but refused to give details. Not because he feared consequences, but because withholding information was power. To the families of missing persons, this was torture. To Keyes, it was control until the end. Chapter 26. Why he chose randomness. Most serial killers are driven by fantasy. Keyes was driven by anxiety about detection. He deliberately avoided victim types, age patterns, geographic clusters, personal connections. Sometimes he didn't even know who his victim would be until minutes before the attack. He explained, "I didn't stalk people for months. That creates emotional attachment. Attachment creates mistakes." This made him extraordinarily dangerous. There was no profile that fit, no warning signs, no escalating pattern. Anyone, anywhere, could be next. Chapter 27. The Samantha Koenig Confession. When Keyes finally discussed the murder of Samantha Koenig in detail, the room went silent. He spoke calmly about abducting her from her workplace, driving her hundreds of miles, killing her shortly after freezing her body, using makeup to stage ransom photos. There was no pride in his voice, only logistics. Detectives noted something chilling. He was more emotionally affected by mistakes he made than by the fact that he killed a young woman. When discussing errors, his tone sharpened. When discussing death, it flattened. Chapter 28. The Limits of Empathy. Keyes insisted he loved his daughter, and in some limited way, that may have been true. But his empathy was selective, narrow, and self-serving. He could feel concern for his child, his own future, his comfort, his autonomy. He could not feel empathy for strangers. Psychologists describe this as instrumental empathy, understanding emotions intellectually without experiencing them emotionally. He knew people suffered. He simply didn't care. Chapter 29. The Suicide as Final Control. In December 2012, Israel Keyes took his own life in his jail cell. He used a razor blade. He strangled himself. He left behind drawings, writings, and a final act of defiance. Even in death, he denied investigators closure. No full list of victims, no maps, no confessions, just silence. For Keyes, suicide wasn't escape. It was control over the ending. Chapter 30. The Victims Will Never Know. Today, dozens, possibly hundreds, of missing persons cases remain open that investigators believe may be connected to Israel Keyes. But without names, without bodies, without confessions. Families wait, maps are studied, travel records analyzed, caches searched. But the truth died with him. Keyes once said, "Some things should never be found." For the families of the missing, that sentence is a life sentence. Chapter 31. Why Israel Keyes Still Haunts Investigators. Israel Keyes represents a terrifying evolution in serial crime. No patterns, no signatures, no emotional leakage, long-term planning, geographic randomness, psychological discipline. He wasn't impulsive, he wasn't chaotic, he was strategic. and that makes him one of the most dangerous predators ever studied. Chapter 32. The Final Reality. Israel Keyes wanted to be unknown, not famous, not admired, not remembered, just untraceable. In many ways, he succeeded, and that is what makes his story so disturbing. Because somewhere, in the countless missing person files across the country, there are names we will never connect to him, faces we will never identify, stories that will never end. Part 4. Death, Legacy, and the Future of Serial Crime. Chapter 1. The End Inside Cell 5. On December 2, 2012, in a solitary cell at the Anchorage Correctional Complex, the man known to investigators as one of the most disciplined and unpredictable predators of the modern era chose his own ending. Israel Keyes was found dead after an apparent suicide. There was no dramatic final statement to the world, no televised confession, no courtroom spectacle. His death was quiet, controlled, and deliberate, consistent with the way he had lived and killed. Authorities later revealed that he had prepared for it meticulously, as he prepared for everything else. The act was not impulsive, it was planned. Keyes left behind a short, disturbing poem. It was not a confession. It was not remorse. It was an assertion of control. His last attempt to keep ownership over the narrative. For investigators, the timing was devastating. They were still working through leads, still cross-checking timelines, still trying to extract the truth from a man who rationed facts like currency. His death froze the investigation in place, locking countless answers behind a door that would never open. Chapter 2. The Silence After the Confession. Keyes had admitted to only a fraction of what investigators believed he had done. He confessed selectively, revealing details only when it served a purpose: better treatment, media leverage, or psychological advantage. He spoke in fragments. He corrected detectives. He tested boundaries. Then, suddenly, there was silence. Without the killer alive, the case transformed from an active investigation into a long, painstaking reconstruction. FBI analysts, state police, and local departments began the grim work of assembling a map of his life. Flight records, bank withdrawals, rental cars, missing persons lists, surveillance footage, receipts, and burial sites. The problem was scale. Keyes traveled constantly. He used cash. He avoided patterns. He selected victims with no obvious connection to him or to each other. He prepared kill kits years in advance and buried them across the country. He attacked strangers, far from home, in places where he left no forensic footprint. His death meant that many of those kits would never be found, and many victims would never be named. Chapter 3. The Victims We Will Never Know. Investigators believe Keyes may have killed more than a dozen people, possibly many more. But certainty is elusive. There are missing persons cases scattered across North America that align eerily with his movements. Disappearances along highways he drove, victims last seen near remote parks he visited, unsolved abductions during windows when his phone went dark and his bank activity spiked in cash withdrawals. In some cases, families received a terrible possibility but no proof. No body, no confession, no closure. Keyes understood something fundamental about modern life: anonymity. He exploited it ruthlessly. He didn't stalk within communities. He didn't escalate locally. He didn't taunt police. He didn't seek fame, at least not until the end. For many families, the question is not how their loved one died, but whether they did. And that uncertainty may be the most lasting cruelty he left behind. Chapter 4. A New Kind of Predator. Israel Keyes did not fit the public's expectations of a serial killer. He wasn't visibly unstable. He didn't crave attention. He didn't kill close to home. He didn't repeat a single method or victim profile. He was adaptable, patient, and deliberately boring on the surface. This made him dangerous in a way that challenged traditional profiling. Keyes represented a shift from compulsion to logistics. Murders planned like operations. From local hunting to national mobility. Crimes spread across jurisdictions. From signature to versatility. No consistent method to link cases. From notoriety to secrecy. Control mattered more than recognition. Law enforcement had long studied killers who wanted to be seen. Keyes wanted the opposite. He wanted to disappear into the noise of everyday life. His case forced agencies to rethink assumptions about patterns, geography, and motive in the age of mass travel and digital footprints. Chapter 5. The Psychological Core. Experts who reviewed Keyes' interviews described a man driven less by rage or fantasy than by dominion, the belief that life and death were tools he could deploy at will. He compartmentalized completely. Family life on one side, violence on the other, no emotional bleed-through. He rehearsed restraint. He practiced waiting. He denied himself gratification to sharpen it later. This self-discipline distinguished him from impulsive offenders and allowed him to operate undetected for years. Most chillingly, he appeared to understand himself clearly. He spoke about his urges not as mysteries, but as facts. There was no plea for understanding, no moral confusion, only management. That clarity made him cooperative at times and terrifying at others. Chapter 6. What his death took from us. When Keyes died, investigators lost confirmation of victim counts, locations of burial sites, the truth behind cryptic hints he dropped in interviews, and the ability to resolve dozens of open cases. What remained were hard drives of evidence and years of work that could never be finished. Some have argued that he chose suicide precisely to deny justice, to end the story on his terms. Others believe it was fear of exposure, of losing control as investigators closed in. Both may be true. What is certain is that his death ensured his victims would carry the burden of uncertainty far longer than he carried the burden of guilt. Chapter 7. Lessons for the future of serial crime. The Keyes case has become a cornerstone study for modern criminal profiling. Its lessons are uncomfortable, but necessary. Mobility is a weapon. Killers who travel widely fracture investigations across jurisdictions. Cash leaves fewer ghosts. Financial anonymity still enables violence. Strangers are harder to connect. Random victim selection defeats pattern-based detection. Preparation beats impulse. Patience and planning can outpace traditional policing models. Silence can be strategy. Not all killers want to be known. In response, agencies have increased data sharing, emphasized behavioral timelines, and invested in cold case analytics that can bridge geography and time. The work is slow, but necessary. Chapter 8. The Man Who Wanted Control. In the end, Israel Keyes left behind no manifesto, no grand confession, no public reckoning. What he left was a shadow, long, quiet, and unresolved. He wanted control over his life. He wanted control over his victims. He wanted control over how the story ended. He achieved some of that, but he did not achieve erasure. The unanswered questions, the families still searching, the investigators still reviewing files. These are the places where his control failed, because even silence leaves evidence.